Grim. Level 10 upgrade. Today I'm going to be installing the LCG conversion kit for the Slash 4x4. This of course was donated to me by RC Guys 100. Thanks a ton, man. Now as you guys can see, he sent me the Nerf bars, a receiver box, the battery strap down, the motor mount plate, the gear cover, the rear and front skid plate. Now there's a couple parts that I am missing, and that would be the steering linkage arm, which is different from the one that you would find on the original chassis, and the servo horn. The servo horn is pointing in the opposite direction, so in order to get that part, I had to go ahead and buy the steering bell crank kit, part 6845X. Now that I have everything I need in order to do this, let's go ahead and get it done. The first thing I'm going to be removing is the front assembly, and it's held on with 4 screws. There's 2 right here and 1 in the chassis on each side. I'm also going to be removing the steering linkage arm by undoing this screw. With those screws out of the way, I can go ahead and pull off the front assembly. I'm just going to grab the chassis, bend it up, and then pull it out. Now I'm going to go ahead and set this off to the side. Now it's time to take off the rear assembly. It's held on with 4 screws as well. We have 2 on top and 2 on bottom. Once those screws are taken care of, I can finally pull off the rear assembly. Now I'm going to go ahead and set that off to the side. Next up, I need to go ahead and start removing all the electronics. I'm going to go ahead and start off by removing the ESC. Now for me, I have the RPM ESC cage on there because, well, the original post broke off. So if you have the original post on here, all you have to do is remove a screw on each side. But with the ESC out of the way, you'll see that it's still hooked up with the receiver box and the motor. However, I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to move on to the servo. I'm going to undo the servo by undoing the 4 screws that hold it in. Now that the servo is taken care of, it's time to go ahead and get into the receiver box. I'm going to be undoing 4 screws, 2 for the top and 2 for the wire tie down. Once those screws are out of the way, you can easily pull off each piece, and now you can see there's a receiver inside. I'm going to go ahead and unplug the servo and the ESC. I'm going to unfeed them through this hole, and I'm going to undo this little grub screw that holds the antenna down. Now that the grub screw is removed, I can easily remove the antenna tube from the chassis, pull out the antenna, and then undo the antenna from the waterproof receiver box. Now I'm going to pry the receiver out, since it's only held down with double-sided tape. And at this point, I'm done with this receiver box. I'm not going to be using it on the new chassis, so you can go ahead and reassemble everything back together. Now it's time to go ahead and concentrate on the motor. It's really held in only with 2 screws. 1 screw that holds it down to the transmission, and the other screw holds down the wires. Once you get the cables free and the motor can slide up and down, you need to go ahead and take off the gear cover, which is held in with 1 screw. With that screw out of the way, you can just go ahead and grab the motor and pull it on out. You can see it will pop off of the gear cover as well. Now, the last thing that we need off this chassis is, of course, the spur gear and slipper clutch assembly. And that, of course, just gets pulled out. Everything else I don't really need to use, but the center drive line can be. So we'll set that off to the side as well. With all the electronics at hand, it's time to go ahead and move on to the front and rear assembly. So I will not be able to attach the front assembly to the new chassis unless I replace the front skid plate. So let's go ahead and get that switched out. First thing I need to do is remove the front bumper. Now if you have the stock bumper, you're going to have to remove these 2 screws as well as these 3. Once you get the front bumper off, you need to remove 3 more screws. This front one in the center of the metal plate and these 2 as well. Next step is to go ahead and pull off this metal plate as well as pulling out these pins that hold the A-arms to the diff housing. Now, the skid plate will pull right off. Next thing, we need to go ahead and detach the steering bell cranks from the front skid plate. It's held on with these 2 screws. Alright. Now once you get the steering bell cranks off after removing those 2 screws, be sure to check and see if you got the bearings off as well. I was rather lucky. Usually the bearings get stuck on the bottom of these posts, and pulling them off can be a bit of a chore. You can go ahead and pry them off, but just be gentle. You don't want to damage the bearing. If you damage it, it's not going to turn very well and the servo is going to strain. But now that you got the front skid plate off, it's time to go ahead and replace it with the LCG version of it. Now, first step is to go ahead and slide the steering bell cranks all the way down. Once they're down, you're going to reattach those 2 screws. Once the steering bell cranks are taken care of, it's time to go ahead and slide the skid plate back onto the diff housing. Push it all the way down, and then you're going to line up the A-arms with the holes so you can slide the pins back in. Once you get the pins reinstalled, you're going to reattach this metal plate. Make sure that the curve is on the top, and then you're going to attach 3 screws. This one in the front and center, and these 2 in the back. After that, it's time to go ahead and reattach the front bumper. Remember, 3 screws on bottom, and if you have the stock bumper, 2 more on top. Now that the front's been taken care of, it's time to move on to the rear. Now the rear is pretty much the identical process. First off, I'm going to start by removing the rear bumper. Once again, there's 2 screws on top, and for the rear, only 2 screws on bottom. Once all 4 of those screws are removed, you can easily pull off the rear bumper. However, there's one little special note. If you have the stock bumper, once again, you're going to have to remove an extra screw right here. And that screw is right there. With the RPM bumper, I'm going to have to take the bumper off and then remove this screw. Now that we got that taken care of, I need to go ahead and remove these 2 screws as well. Okay, now we can pull off that metal plate, pull out the pins that hold in the A-arms, and now pull off the skid plate itself. Once we get this done with, we can go ahead and switch it out with the new one. The new one slides right into place. Now we're going to go ahead and line up the A-arms with the hole on the skid plate. And then we're going to slide the pin in. Do that for each side. Now we can attach the metal plate. Remember that with the rear one, the 2 notches point down. Now we can go ahead and reattach these 2 screws. And now we can go ahead and reattach the rear bumper. Since I have the RPM one, I need to go ahead and put that screw in before I attach it. Other than that, I need to go ahead and put 2 screws on top, 2 on bottom. With the stock bumper, remember to go ahead and attach the 5th screw in the back. Now that the rear is taken care of, it's time to go ahead and take care of a couple of odds and ends. First of all, the motor mount plate. This is held on with 2 screws. I need to go ahead and take the old one off. Once you take off the old plate, you're going to be replacing it with a new one. And instead of these 2 holes, you're going to be using these 2 holes in order to attach the plate. Now that that's been taken care of, you can go ahead and set this off to the side. However, there is a quick note. If you do have a really big pinion gear, well, you're going to have to take it off in order to pull off the plate. And that's just held on with this small grub screw. Next thing I need to do is go ahead and remove the old servo horn and steering linkage. That's all held on with a single screw. Next up, I need to go ahead and center it. If you don't know how to center it, this is what you do. You attach your servo to the receiver, attach the ESC also to the receiver. The receiver for the ESC is channel 2. The receiver for the servo is channel 1. Put that all in, then you're going to plug in a battery, turn on your remote, then you're going to center the steering trim right to 0, and then you're going to turn on the ESC. And now your servo is centered. All you have to do now is unplug it and turn everything off. Now it's time to go ahead and attach the servo horn. You're going to hold the servo this direction, and then you're going to get the horn itself, and you're not going to point it straight up. You're going to do the next notch over that points it at that angle. Push it down, and then you're going to reattach this screw. Once that's taken care of, you're going to go ahead and get this screw off from your old steering linkage, and you're going to attach the new steering linkage just like this. Once you get that screw in there, make sure that it's not over tightened. You do want this to be a loose fit. Now you can go ahead and attach this to the new chassis. You're going to get the cable and you're going to string it through this giant hole. And then you're going to slide the servo into place and attach it using 4 screws. Alright, now it's time to go ahead and start attaching everything else to this chassis. First of all, we have the Nerf bars. The Nerf bars easily just slide from the bottom up into the chassis, and each one is held in with 4 screws. After that, I need to move on to the motor mount. First thing to do is to attach this screw. This screw is going to hold the motor mount plate in place. Next up, I need to go ahead and attach to the chassis. It slides into the back just like that, and it's held in with 4 screws. 2 on each side on the bottom and 2 on each side on the top. Next up is the battery tie down. The front piece slides in right there, and the part for the rear slides in right there. Now on the bottom, each one is held in with 2 screws. Now we can go ahead and slide the battery tie down just like that. And finally, we can move on to the receiver box. The bottom of the receiver box is held in to the chassis using 2 screws. After that, you can go ahead and put in the rubber seal, followed by the receiver itself. Now, I got some double-sided tape. I'm going to go ahead and pull off the paper, and I'm going to put it into the receiver box just like that. Be sure to get this rubber seal down because you don't want it getting caught up in the wires. Because now we need to go ahead and start feeding it through the top of the box. The antenna comes out right through there, and the servo gets fed in through the top. Servo gets plugged in to channel 1. With that taken care of, it's time to move on to the ESC and motor. However, I'm going to go ahead and install this first. This is a spur/slipper clutch assembly. Now, if you didn't already, you did need to go ahead and take off the bearing from the old motor mount because you are going to need it with the LCG. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide that into the motor mount just like that. And now we're going to attach the ESC. Now, if you have just a regular Valenian ESC, all you're going to do is attach it using 2 screws. With the ESC taken care of, it's time to go ahead and attach the motor. Now, as you saw before, I put that screw into the motor mount. So I'm going to slide that little notch straight onto that screw and then push it over. Next up, I need to get a 3mm nut and slide it into this little groove and then install the motor mount plate screw right here. With the motor taken care of, I can go ahead and focus on finishing up the receiver box. So next thing I need to do is I need to get the plug for the ESC, feed it through the top, and plug this into the receiver for channel 2. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and attach the top of the waterproof receiver box. Just be careful not to pinch any of the wires in the process. It's held down with 2 screws. And the final step for this part is to go ahead and attach the antenna tube and feed all the wires into the box and adjust them to the proper length. And then I can go ahead and attach the wire tie down. It's only held down with 2 screws. Okay, we are almost done. Next up, I need to go ahead and attach the rear assembly. Now, it's just like it is with the stock chassis. You're going to have to line up the flat edges inside of this bearing inside of there, slide it into position, and then attach the 2 screws on top and the 2 screws on bottom. Now that the rear is taken care of, it's time to go ahead and install the center drive line. It's going to go right through this front hole, and then I'm going to slide it into position just like this. And now for the front assembly, I need to make sure that the steering linkage arm is in this position when I attach it. When it's like that, I'm going to go ahead and push it onto the front, and it's held into position with 4 screws, 1 on each side in the chassis and then 2 in the front. With all 4 of those screws installed, it's time to go ahead and flip it upside down one more time, and I need to go ahead and attach the steering linkage arm to the steering bell cranks with 1 screw. A quick little note about this screw, it's just like the other one that's in the steering linkage. You don't want to tighten it all the way down. Now, it's time to go ahead and finally do the meshing for the spur and pinion gear. All I have to do is stick a piece of paper in between the gears, push them all the way together, tighten this screw down the rest of the way, and then attach the gear cover. The gear cover slides right into position and is held down with 1 screw. With that taken care of, there's one last step that I won't be able to do. There is a wire tie down that goes right here. I don't have that piece. Sometime in the future I might get it, but for now, the wires are just going to have to stay like this. And I am done with this upgrade, guys. There's a lot of steps, but believe me, it was worth it. Now, if you want to see a quick comparison of just how much lower it is, get the old chassis, line it up, and you can see that it drops it a good inch. So believe me, guys, this is going to improve the performance, and it's not going to be as easy to flip it over. Thank you again, RC guys, for this awesome donation. And that was Grimm's level 10 upgrade. Now that the ESC is... ESC... That is not... After that, it's time to move on to the battery strap down. The front piece slides in right here. Wrong direction. The front piece slides in right here, and the back piece slides in... Oh, dropped it. The front piece goes in right here, and the beer... Now I start having issues. There, and the beer... I said beer again. Maybe I need a beer. The front piece slides in right there, and the rear piece... Gosh, I cannot say this. And the rear piece goes in right there. Huzzah! Now let's see if we can do that on camera. Next up, I need to go ahead and attach the rear. Oh, now it's on for the battery. Now it's on. Yeah, it is. It's been on. I need to end it. That's what I need to do. 4 screws that hold it on. My finger stuck. Ow. Ow.